Thank you, Cooper Surgical, for giving me this opportunity to participate in this webinar where I will share with you our experiences when we shifted from manual to electronic witnessing system in our IVF lab. Any human endeavor is prone to human error. There are different mistakes which can occur in complex processes which are carried out in any IVF clinic. The following news clippings are examples where we do not have to look far to see publicized examples of high-profile events involving ART mix-ups or mistakes. The possible consequences of these mix-up and errors are, for example, for the patients, they will suffer from loss of gametes, embryos, and even baby, and will go through expensive legal battles in court for custody, while for the IVF clinics, they will either lose their license, will be closed from operation, and for IVF physicians and embryologists, they will be at risk of losing their licenses, reputation, and job. Hence, there is a need and importance to have an witnessing system in the IVF lab. To prevent these events involving mix-ups and errors in IVF, the double checking of all critical steps in IVF cycle has become mandatory. Manual double witnessing is the most standard approach, which is defined as the double checking performed on all critical procedures in laboratory procedures. It is done by two staff members reading the dishes, tubes, and embryology sheets to confirm and determine correct patient. Here I am sharing with you an example of a near miss which occurred between husband's name in the semen tube and ovum pickup sheet. This is a non-compliance to International Patient Safety Goal 1, which is the proper patient identification. However, we took this opportunity to develop a performance improvement project to prevent this near miss ever happening again. For this purpose, a multidisciplinary team was formed, which included IVF lab director, director quality and risk management, IVF charge nurse, CROs, and the center manager. The multidisciplinary team identified different root causes of non-compliance that were identified using the fishbone diagram. The team decided that an electronic witnessing system is required. After looking at different options, team decided to recommend RI witnessing system. As compared to the manual double witnessing protocols, RI electronic witnessing system involves time-saving features by reducing the time of an embryo exposed outside the incubator. It allows embryologists to work independently with RI verification system without needing another embryologist as double witness, thus potentially freeing up staff members to carry out more procedures and increasing overall IVF lab efficiency. Especially during this time of pandemic where the physical distancing is recommended and minimizing face-to-face interaction between staff, patients, and small teams are recommended where people are working alone or in shift pattern. RI witness system is the perfect solution to all these recommendations. RI witness system safeguards and verify information throughout the procedures. It tracks documents and progress. Moreover, it displays warning alarms when there is a mismatch. However, this can only be achieved by proper planning and installation when it is designed by the IVF lab embryologists that works in line with the existing standard operating procedures. While planning and installation, there is always challenges that we also face during our installation our installation procedures. Our first challenge is the typical human nature of resisting the change because of the perceived attributes to change, the receptivity to change, always considering that the co-embryologist is the best person to double witness. So these were the main challenges. The next challenge was that the At the time of implementation, we decided that the whole clinic has to be integrated into the workflow. It is very important for each IVF clinic to be acquainted and trained during the installation of RI Witness in order for each IVF healthcare provider to see the benefits of using the system from the reception to the consultation room to the operating theater, IVF andrology and embryology lab. Through this, whole team can create a well-structured plan and outline the exact requirements of their IVF clinic. Next step was to cover all conceivable steps to include in the flow diagram. And this was all conceived and planned. The IVF procedures, when we put them all together, it looked like a maze, and it was difficult to pass through. The main challenge after the conceiving of the plan and the installation was to continue to sustain current achievement through implementing standard practice to achieve the zero defect mislabeling target. All these challenges were overcome by organized educational training sessions, which were firstly they were needed to develop these strategies, and then it was for the training of the relevant staff members. This was done by the IVF lab director. When we had the installation was complete and the project was implemented, proper training was done, embryologist was feeling comfortable, then as a part of the PI project, when we reviewed our system again, our clinical indicators, we found that there was a zero the defect after the installation of the project. This a typical picture showing the staff working in IVF lab using the RI Witness, where typically only single embryologist is working on any station and doesn't require any other witness to go through the cycle. And this whole cycle is not only monitored by the RI, timings is monitored, the embryologist who is working that, so it is very easy to audit the procedures afterward. Throughout the installation, implementation, and then the successful implementation, there were of course lessons learned. We learned that it is impossible to achieve a success in a critical aspect when new features, a new product is developed and is implemented without the senior management and leadership support. It is not possible. It is always better to have an interdisciplinary team approach to achieve the optimal outcomes. PDCA model is a very effective method to accomplish these tasks. Continuous in-service education and awareness sessions are important to sustain achievements. Self-engagement and commitment improving the quality of care delivered is very, very important. My final message is that RI Witnesses system is a system which protects the events which can result into devastating results for any IVF clinic. That is the correct identification of the patient, correct identification of the sample, and this with the zero defects. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christina Heilmann, and I'm the Regional Quality Manager Germany for the Vivaneo clinics, now the Fertility Partnership. We introduced RI Witness in Germany and over the whole group last year, but before we used the RI Witness system in one of our Berlin clinics 10 years ago, and they were really satisfied with using RI Witness. And now we spread it all over the Vivaneo group. And I would like to give you a presentation on the quality management view and patient safety view on human errors and its effects in the IVF laboratory, and how we can stay safe, not using only RI Witness, the system, from a quality management perspective. First, we have our agenda. What is the highest risk we have to? This is the spread of gametes. Then a quick introduction into human error. Also the Swiss cheese model by James Reason. Maybe you have heard of the second victim. And especially we have a closer look on the risks in the IVF laboratory and to sum up our witness and why we're using it. Let's start with our highest risks, the swab of gametes we have. And now we think that can't occur, but it still does. It's a really, really rare cases where it happened. But there are some. There's one from last year. It has happened in a clinic in Los Angeles. And the couple shown in the picture has sued one of the fertility clinics in Los Angeles because they were just called to a DNA test. They were told it is kind of routine testing, but the day after their DNA test, they got a call and received the information that another woman from New York has given birth to their embryo. And it was a mixture of 3 different couples, and they now think that every one of these 3 women has received a false treatment and was implanted the wrong embryos. And the couple here shown in the picture has been told that somebody else have given birth to their baby. And this is why they sued the fertility clinic and the New York women who gave birth to their child. And the New York woman who gave birth to their children, she expected to give birth to 2 Asian girls, but it were 2 boys that looked different between each other, and they looked totally different to their born parents. So there must be a genetically mess behind it. After that legal dispute, the New York women have to pass their babies to their genetic parents, and the couple that has sued has received this baby boy, and she also has to give back the second baby boy to her genetic parents. So this New York woman, she is really, really suffering under the consequences, and there can be no compensation for that pain and that suffering, and she is still psychologically suffering from these consequences she had. And another case some years ago, it was in Austria, that is why it is in German, and it says, has fertility guru switched second egg? This belongs to a kind of clinic group in Austria, and a really, really famed reproductive physician there, and it happened in the 90s. And now the adult woman was unsure about her genetics because she doesn't look similar to her family or her parents or somebody else of her relatives. And this is why she knew that she was an IVF baby. That is why she underwent a DNA test. And in this test, there was confirmed that she was neither the daughter of her mother nor of her father. She has grown up with for over 20 years. And they had also reached out to the doctor, and he says that there might have gone something wrong, and he may have switched the petri dishes of the embryos. After the death of the father from that woman, the sister also underwent a DNA testing, and there also had to been a failure and a switch up. So the sister of the woman, she was the genetic child of her mother but not of her father, so there was something messed up with the semen in these cases. And now the mother and the 2 daughters are currently claiming a damage on about 1.1 million euros to this clinic because they are now all looking for their genetic parents and couldn't find them yet. So it is rare, but it happens. And what can happen to the clinic after such cases? We have an immense financial loss because we have to pay the compensations and the damages that had happened. We have the damage on the reputation of the clinic. This is why there will be less patients come in, because the patients lost the confidence in the clinics. And we have the uncertainty of the employees, because they don't know what is going to happen afterwards, after these mistakes. But had we look at the human factor, how does these kind of errors may occur? We have no awareness of risks and risky processes by the staff. We may have systematic errors in the processes on each process step. We had a few standards in the process sequences, and this is why we need quality management, because the SOPs helps us to put the processes in line and to do things well. We may have a hectically and stressy everyday clinical life, and this is why we are unaware or unattentive on some things or some risky processes, or we may just forget something to do. And this is why inattention occurs failure of an individual. That may happen, or when we reach out to the case before, to the Austrian case, he says he may have simply forgot to put on his reading glasses, and this is why he cannot read out the labeling on the dishes properly and mixed up the dishes, because on these days there were different couples that may had nearly the same names, so he just got confused and mixed it up because he couldn't read out properly. And this is something we really have to be careful that things like that doesn't happen. Let's have a closer look at the Swiss cheese model by James Reason. It says how failures occur and how patient harm happened. And it can be prevented by different kind of defenses, barriers, and safety guards. And all these kind of different barriers are visualized as slices of cheese. Each slice acts against things going wrong, but they are all kind of not 100% intact, because there are different weaknesses in each slice that may holes occur. One hole isn't really the problem, and if one mistake gets through one hole, that isn't really problem either, because we have different kinds of these slices, and the error should be stopped by one of these defenses and barriers it goes against. But sometimes it happens that we have all holes from different barriers in one line, and then the accident occur. Yes, these holes can arise through active failure and latent conditions, and we have latent conditions in the organization and in the policies, because the policies aren't well, they aren't trained, they aren't up to date. The scribe processes went another way around than it is written in the policies. We may have responsibility shifting, and now I don't know who's my line manager or whom to ask. Especially we have inadequate training of the people who are doing things or carrying out things. They carry out things wrong. We have team conditions that aren't fine. We have now communication. People doesn't feel well working in the clinic. We may have a problem of profession, or we have individual or technically problems that people don't know how to use technique right, or technique is unhandy, it doesn't really fit to the process, or we had just inattention of the people by themselves, and this is why things can slip and accidents and mistakes can occur. And with our eyewitness, we have added another slice of cheese to this Swiss cheese model to have a defense against this human factor and the human errors like bad communication or inattendance in the clinics. So let's have a closer look on the second victim. Maybe you've heard of it, because not only the patient is harmed by human errors, also the staff is harmed as well, because they often feel really, really guilty on what had happened, because they want to harm nobody. They want to give a good treatment, and that the patient feels well in the clinic and gets the best treatment they can, and so they feel guilty once something is gone wrong. They are uncertain in their further work in the clinics, and they are unsure about the processes because such a bad mistake had happened. They have the fear of making mistakes again. And they also have the fear that they may lose their job because they have made a huge mistake, and the trust isn't there anymore from the line management to the staff. They are carrying out the processes, and this is why they maybe have a longer absence from work, because they can't stand this whole situation, and they feel so guilty that they really, really suffer under working and doing patient treatments. And this whole situation can cause even more human errors by a person on its own, because he just feels insecure, or in a whole team, because the whole team feels insecure because they don't know how to act or how to behave on this situation and on this person and on the error made. So let's have a closer look to the processes in the IVF laboratory and the risks in the IVF laboratory. First, we have the risk of misidentification of the samples and the gametes, sample mix-up, alignable markings, and the delivery of incorrect dishes or cups, especially for semen when they are brought from home. We had a closer look at the ICSI process in our organization through a bachelor's thesis, and we did an interview with one of our lab heads from Düsseldorf, and from this interview we collected information for a failure mode and effect analysis, and we did that for the ICSI process, and in this process we identified 46 process steps, and from these 46 process steps were 16 critical. The picture you can see now is from our eyewitness flyer. We used to hand it out to our patients from Vivaneo, and it just shows quickly the steps of each procedure and how we reduce the risks through our eyewitness. At first, we have the patient identification at the front desk, and each patient couple gets an ID card with the data on it from the women and the male guy or male patient we have. And now this couple is tracked together on this eyewitness card. Before the woman goes to the punction, she has to stick in the card from our witness in the OP field and has to actively identify herself as the woman on the card, and then she gets the punction. And in the IVF laboratory, the dishes just can be tagged with the women that is in the OP and that the ID card is sticked in front of, so we have no mess during different patients and the egg collection. Same is for the male part. The male guy gets a cup with his name and birth date and things like that on it, and he has to actively identify himself and the cup that it is just fitting together and that it is his. Same as when he takes it home for sperms delivery and brings it back. Then he also has to identify himself and the semen cup and things like that. So, picture 2 shows that we just tag the samples on this RFID chip, and that we now make sure that it is tagged well with the name and the RFID chip from the women and from the male partner. And we just have to fill in or switch dishes and things like that. We always tag these dishes, semen cups, and so on with the RFID tag additionally to the normal labeling of each dish, so we cannot mix up anything. When we put things together, like the ICSI process does, we put the semen into the egg cell, so we have these radar antennas that reads out the RFID chips, and so we make sure that we just put the right couple together, even if they have not the same name, if they have other names and things that make it more different. So we just stay safe and know that we have the right couple putting together the semen and the egg cells into one dish for the ICSI process. Then we are doing the ICSI, and during this process, if something just happened or happened before with the labeling of the dishes, then we had this noise through the RI witness system that we are going to mix up something, and we are disturbed in this process, and so we get to know that we have to have a look what had happened. And same as for the embryo transfer, the woman comes for the embryo transfer and has to identify herself actively before transfer with her card, so we are sure that the right embryo is fitting to the woman. What we had a closer look at it in the failure mode and effective analysis said that we had another barrier through RI witness because we have no confusion on anything that's going on in the processes in the IVF laboratory. We have a liable labeling. We had a barrier for delivering the wrong sample cup because the male part also have to identify himself actively. We have no missing data on the sample cups because we tap or tag every cup or every dish with an RFID chip, so we make sure that we know to whom the sample belongs. We cannot combine anything wrong, and we disregard the work order, and sometimes you have language barrier by identifying persons by their name, and even that helps us with language barriers because the name is written on the card and the woman can read it out loud, and also the man, and sees what is on the card. And also we have taken away the danger of the human factor because everything is going automatically and the process steps are aligned before because of the RI witness diagram that we heard of. And one of or two of the most risky things is the sample delivery of the man still, because we cannot go home with him and have a look at it when he delivers the sperm at home. And we have to make sure that the cups belongs to the right guy and have to identify himself also actively. And the other part is that we put at the front desk everything right on the RFID card. We have the right women on the right card with the right partner. These are still the most risky processes. But at all, I can say when we count every risky step together and risky priority numbers, we have reduced the risks in all risky process steps, in these 16 risky process steps, while fitting up everything on about the average of 85% through our witness. So the process is a lot safer, and we have reduced the human factor nearly to zero in these processes. To conclude why we are using RI witness, we have introduced another further technical safety barrier to stay safe and to reduce the human factor in the processes. We have a standardization of these processes through the witness point diagram. We have a safe and consistent labeling of the dishes. So we have to have a look on our reading classes, but we don't need them anymore. We could also do it without, but to take care of, we should do the 4i contact and the RI witness and labeling on the dishes. And we have an easy patient and gamete identification through the whole XC process. And this is reducing the risk of human errors by a huge amount. And it makes our staff feel safer during their work in the IVF laboratory because they know that we do as much as we can against their human factors. And it also is better for the patient because he feels safer during his or her treatment. So, thank you very much for your attention. Like James Reason said, we cannot change the human condition, but we can change the conditions under which humans work. And this is why we introduced our witness, and it helps us really, really much. So, just time for your questions. Thank you very much.
Greetings, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the enhanced security methods available through the electronic witnessing platform RI Witness to individually track blastocysts and their biopsies in the ART laboratory. Our program has recently incorporated RI Witness into our ART laboratories, and we have easily embraced its utility and potential as an effective electronic witnessing platform. The objectives of my brief talk today is to discuss the importance of tracking individual blastocysts and their associated biopsies in the ART laboratory, to detail the current methods that our laboratory is performing with RI Witness in tracking embryos and their biopsies, to discuss the current challenges in electronic witnessing and tracking of individual blastocysts and biopsies, and finally to provide some ideas to improve and advance RI Witness technology. For all of us that are performing a sufficient quantity of PGT on our patients, the importance of accurately tracking individual embryos and their biopsies is painfully obvious. Just by nature, in the accuracy of PGTA being 98% means that 2 out of 100 diagnoses are going to be wrong. This becomes most apparent when gender discrepancies occur at ultrasound in our patients. When a misdiagnosis occurs, the first question is, was it a mix-up in the ART laboratory? ART laboratories do not have the luxury of being 98% accurate, and therefore they must document the chain of custody for every gamete, embryo, and biopsy in the laboratory. As we know, the chain of custody must be witnessed and documented for each ART step. This can be accomplished by having a lab person double witness each step, or where feasible, an electronic witnessing system. Using only humans for double witnessing all the steps in an ART laboratory requires the need to hire additional personnel for that purpose. In addition to the financial constraints, the increased crowding in a limited space has become even a bigger concern with COVID and the need to physically distance. Furthermore, the reliability, integrity, and accuracy of humans as compared to electronic recording has come into question. Now, every ART lab performs their procedures differently. We use different media, different plasticware, and the details of each method are different. However, all of us are performing the same technique. In this case, biopsying blastocysts, cryopreserving them, and sending their biopsies for genetic testing. The first step in blastocyst biopsy is to move the selected blastocysts from the extended culture dish into the center well of the PGD culture dish. Note that the PGD culture dish is numbered on the periphery, but no numbers on the center well, and the extended culture dish is then put back into the incubator if it's day 5 or day 6 for further culture. The next step is to take the individual blastocysts to be biopsied and place them into numbered drops of the biopsy dish. Note that we have a maximum of 4 biopsy drops here with their associated wash drops for the biopsy in this system. Up to this point, No double witnessing is necessary, as our eyewitness is tracking the patient's dishes to be sure that they are matching. After the blastocysts have been biopsied under the inverted scope, the biopsy dish is returned to the dissecting scope, and the individually numbered blastocysts are transferred to the corresponding number of the PGT culture dish. Note that this step must be double witnessed to be sure that the blastocysts are going into the appropriately numbered PGT culture drop. After the individually numbered blastocysts are transferred into the appropriate drops of the PGT culture dish, the assigned patient's vitrification dish is brought into the arena, and the individually numbered blastocysts are transferred to the equilibration solutions in the vitrification process. Again, note that this movement of individually numbered blastocysts must be double witnessed into the appropriate equilibration solutions of the vitrification dish. Our eyewitness uses barcodes to verify patient embryos on cryo devices. Its software allows the option to track individual embryos on each of the numbered cryo devices. The software can also be modified to put on the appropriate numbered information on every cryo device. In our case, we use embryo number, patient's first initial and last name. We use a EMR number, as well as the date that the cryopreservation has occurred. At the time of vitrification, the individually barcoded cryo devices are scanned, and the appropriately numbered blastocyst is moved through the vitrification dishes and placed onto the cryo device for vitrification. Again, note that the movement of the individually numbered blastocysts through the vitrification solutions and onto the cryo device must be double witnessed by a human. For tubing the biopsies, individually numbered biopsies are moved through the wash dishes and must be witnessed to be transferred to the appropriately numbered microtube. After centrifugation, the microtubes are transferred to a carrier, which has been assigned with an RFID tag to the appropriate patient. Since biopsies are performed on day 5, day 6, and in our lab, day 7, subsequent biopsy dishes will be matched to the appropriate carrier for that patient. One of the powerful features of our eyewitness is not only to track individually numbered embryos and their cryo devices, but also after receiving the PGD testing results, those results for the suitability of transfer of each individual embryo may be assigned to that embryo. In the eyewitness manager, the suitability for transfer is assigned and then double witnessed by another human. In our eyewitness, each individually numbered embryo can be assigned either approved for transfer, in the case of, for instance, euploidy, not approved for transfer, in the case, for example, of aneuploidy embryos, and in situations where embryos are either not biopsied or the results are indeterminate or no DNA was present, those embryos may be assigned that they were not reviewed. Upon warming the embryo for transfer, the correct carrier is brought into the work area, scanned, and verified as appropriate for transfer by our eyewitness. A new RFID tagged dish is brought into the work area for warming, and subsequently that embryo is then warmed and transferred to a embryo culture dish, which is also tagged and ultimately matched to the RFID tag of the patient whom is getting the embryo transfer. RI Witness is a very robust and powerful electronic witnessing system. But just like all current electronic witnessing systems, there are challenges to develop methods to avoid the need for human double witnessing. Once an embryo gets biopsied, it must have a unique number, and that numbered embryo has to be tracked and documented at every step, ultimately to the appropriately numbered cryo device by human double witness. In addition, that individually numbered biopsy must be double witnessed for its transfer into the appropriately numbered microtube. As I demonstrated previously, individually numbered blastocysts must be double witnessed from the biopsy dish to the PGT holding dish, from the PGT holding dish to the appropriately numbered vitrification dish, from the appropriately numbered vitrification dish to the appropriately numbered cryo device. In addition, the biopsy must be double witnessed as it's transferred into the appropriately numbered PGT microtubule. Currently, we do not know what kind of methods the next-gen sequencing programs use to follow the tubes that we put the biopsies in through their system. It would be nice to know if they are following similar methods. I know many of us in ART laboratories, as well as those in the electronic witnessing companies, are trying to develop technologies to replace human double witnessing, as I have outlined in this talk. Such ideas as using micro RFID tags or micro QR codes that can be visualized through the dissecting microscope camera may be useful. In addition, those micro tags could be used for labeling and tracking the PGT microtubes, not only in the IVF laboratory, but also that continuity could be transferred to the PGT testing facilities to follow individual biopsies through their testing. Artificial intelligence may be available to individually recognize not only each blastocyst but also their biopsies through the entire process of vitrification and warming. Finally, the idea of using voice command incorporation not only to track and label the blastocysts and their biopsies throughout the laboratory, but also to identify those embryologists who are performing those techniques. And finally, perhaps voice command can do more than just that. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, my name is Debbie Venier. I am the founder of the World Embryology Skills and Training Center in Carlsbad, California, and I've been invited by Cooper to discuss the RI Witness analytical features for optimizing your laboratory. All right, I first want to thank Cooper for the opportunity to be able to do this. I started using the Witness system in our laboratory at La Jolla IVF about almost a year ago. And I wanted to discuss some of the extra features that we found that were available to us that I didn't even realize were available when we started using Witness, because ultimately we purchased it for electronic witnessing, but there's a lot of bonus features that we didn't really realize were there. So I wanted to discuss those with you. I first want to say my conflict of interest slide is I am an embryology consultant for Cooper Surgical. All right, so going over the features of RI Witness in your quality management system, just kind of an overview. I know some other people have touched on these first few topics, and I'm going to be focusing on the bottom two. So the witnessing, obviously, electronic witnessing is the ultimate purpose most people are buying this piece of equipment for. The patient ID cards, which I have found to be truly very exceptional for the patient, realizing that they have this RFID card that is tagged to them and tagged to all of their dishes. So that was a really good feature that really gave our patients peace of mind when they would come in for an egg retrieval or they would come in for an embryo transfer, because that's a very common question that they're asking you is, how do you know these embryos are mine? And now we can actually give them a very solid and concrete answer saying that everything has been RFID tagged and tracked throughout their whole cycle, and it's very comforting to them. The next portion is the imaging that you can ID confirm visually as well as electronically throughout the lab on your monitors with a birth date and patient name. And then the patient is also viewing that in their transfer room or in their operating room in a monitor that would be available for their viewing in there. The paperless data capture, not having to really enter any of the data, it's all recorded automatically. So which embryologist it is, at what time it was done is all automatically. I know early on they were having you, kind of enter a passcode for who's doing it and whatnot, but now the embryologists just have a little RFID that IDs themselves that I wear just around my wrist. You can wear it on a lanyard around your neck that IDs you as the embryologist. So that's a great added feature that you don't have to really be writing or recording anything. It's all done automatically. The traceability of materials was also an added feature that I didn't even realize was there when we got it, where we can literally just scan in our dishes, scan in our media, and it automatically tracks the lot numbers and the expiration dates, and it identifies when the expiration dates are, and it'll give you a little alert that you have something coming up that's going to expire, and that was a great added benefit. So the bottom two things that I'm going to kind of go into more detail are the daily overview board and a workflow management analytics. So the next slide, there we go. So the first thing that we're going to look at when we start to look analytically at the witness system is the tracking of laboratory performance. So when you're looking at the RI witness system on your computer, you have a little menu over here of items that you can review. Going into witness points, looking at the statistics and the analytics, you're going to be able to divide out your analytics by operator, by the work area, by the number of procedures that are being performed by each and at each area, and then also the time taken per procedure. So it's real interesting to see. And again, this isn't anything you're recording. It's all recorded automatically. So how do these analytics help your lab? If you're actually using them thoroughly and appropriately, it's really going to ease your quality management. And I'm going to go over some examples and some slides to come to show how that happens. It very discreetly monitors every procedure, so the embryologist doesn't really feel rushed or stressed that they're being timed, even though they are. There's no timers going on or timers beeping that are going to stress the embryologist out. It's just everything is recorded. This highlights a need for training. If you're seeing one embryologist that's more slow than another, or one embryologist that seems to steer away from a certain procedure, maybe there's a problem there. It also highlights a need for changes in workflow when you're looking at where are people doing their procedures, why is everyone leaning towards one microscope, etc. It shows differences in SOP compliance. Again, I'll show you an example of that coming up, but you might see that for an oocyte vitrification, it should be a certain timing, and a vit of an embryo should be a certain time, and you're actually seeing exactly how long it's taking, and it may not be quite in compliance of what it's supposed to be. Displays improvements over time, so you can see people getting quicker, procedures going overall faster. It identifies correlations and relationships within the data, so we're going to go over all of this coming up. It improves attention to detail within procedures, and ultimately it's going to improve our outcomes if we use this to make our labs better. So the daily workflow management, this is what your computer screen will look like on any given day, with a list of all your patients here that are in cycle. And white is patients that are not in the lab yet, but they've been entered into the system. They're coming up. They're going to have an ICSI on October 11th, and this patient will be having an ICSI case on October 13th. So they're white, so they're not in the incubators at that point. Everybody else that has a color is in the lab on this given day. So red means we haven't done anything to this patient yet, and they will be attended to at some point during the day. Green means these are totally done. We're done with them. We don't need to mess with them again. Their identifications and witnessing protocols have happened for the day, and the procedures that were supposed to happen are done. So green is done. Yellow means we've started their procedures. There's been some identification, witnessing steps in there, but we're not done for the day. So for like here, it says there's been an embryo thaw, and we're awaiting transfer preparation. So here we've thawed eggs and we've retrieved eggs in an egg retrieval and we're awaiting vitrification of those eggs. So it's a nice screen to look at, and we just have this monitor up in our lab that any embryologist can look at any time, and it's refreshed every few minutes, so you're able to see what needs to be done, what's been done, and what's in the middle of being done. So I really like having that little check-off sheet that's automatically taken care of in the laboratory. So here are some analytics that show identifying outliers in procedure numbers. So if you want to look at, is there an even distribution of work throughout your laboratory? So number of procedures by operator. So here's an example of several operators in a laboratory and how many procedures each of them are doing. And what you're going to be asking yourself is, why aren't these procedures more even between embryologists? So having worked in this laboratory, I'm going to tell you that the bottom 4 people were either per diem or training. The reception was when we were trying to get a card reader up at a reception desk. So those ones we're going to kind of weed out. But the top 3 are the full-time embryologists, and again, very differing procedure numbers. So Sherry was out on an extended leave, so that kind of explains why she does so many fewer procedures. But then Debbie and Ping are left in the lab, and again, Ping is doing a lot more procedures than Debbie. So me being Debbie, I'm going to tell you, I tend to do more paperwork in the laboratory. I'm one of the supervisors, or was one of the supervisors, and I tend to do more CAP, emails, patient interaction, things like that. So I was doing a lot less, notably a lot less lab procedures. But again, it was something to think about. Gee, Ping, are you being stressed out doing this many procedures? That's a lot of pressure on you. Do we need to sit down and talk about this? So it was a good thing to kind of see the numbers and be able to review in the lab, and is there too much stress on Ping? Does Ping maybe need to do more paperwork, and Debbie need to step into the lab? And then over here, this is number of procedures by location. So 1A and 1B in our laboratory is the room temperature bench, and 2A and 2B are our 37-degree bench. So obviously 2B is the most heavily used, and that's where we do all of our egg retrievals and all of our transfers from. So maybe as a lab director from a workflow point, you might need to think, wow, this is a very heavily used area. Are we utilizing the rest of the lab as we should? That is the scope that's closest to our OR in our transfer room, so we tend to go there. And is there a problem? Is there a bottleneck here? Do we need to work on some things there? Is one workstation favored, or is there an actual problem? And I'll also be the first one to tell you, if you look at 1A and 1B, our room temperature benches where we do all of our VIT and our thaws, obviously 1B is heavily used, and here there actually is a little problem because scope 1A has a little scratch on the glass viewing area of the scope where we put the dish, and we tend to not want to use that microscope because of that scratch, and it makes it hard to see sometimes, especially when you're loading an embryo for freezing. So that's something maybe the lab director should address and move forward with making things better in the laboratory. Identifying outliers in the timing of procedures. So here, the total procedure time by operator, you're going to see again, Ping does the most amount of work, so she also is going to have the most amount of time done. However, if you look, Debbie in the last slide only had 33% of the procedures, but she's taking up 40% of the time. So that makes me wonder, is she slow? What is she doing? Why is she taking so much time to do her procedures when Ping is so much faster? Well, first of all, I'm going to admit to you, Ping is a machine. But besides that, maybe Debbie is doing more of the larger cases, the large ICSI cases, the large biopsy cases, some large freezings where when Ping is really busy in the lab, that's when Debbie comes in to help. So there's larger procedures. So that might kind of be a reason why, but also, again, it's something, just a red flag there to make you think, let me check this and make sure there's not a problem here. Total procedures by location, again, we're kind of seeing the same thing with most of everything being in that microscope that's closest to the OR and closest to the transfer rooms. And is that a problem or a bottleneck? Sorry about that. Embryo transfer. So these are our most common procedures in the laboratory, and it's just kind of a good use for the lab director to see where's most of the stress in my laboratory. So when you're monitoring your SOPs, you've got your witness points, and then here you have your average procedure time by witness point. And one of the things I like in here is looking at oocyte vitrification versus regular vit, which is our embryonic vit, and the timing of the two. So our oocyte vitrification procedure is a 15-minute procedure. However, it's taking an average of 13 minutes and 59 seconds, which is slower. So that definitely identifies a need for maybe reviewing our SOPs. Are some of the embryologists, when they're freezing eggs, freezing them with an embryo vit protocol, which is a 12-minute protocol, and here it's taking an average of about 13 minutes, so that's kind of right along with what we would expect the protocol to see. But the red flag for me is the fact that oocyte vit is running on average shorter. So what's going on there? Does everybody know that our eggs are going to have a different protocol than our embryos, and they're in the ES solution a little bit longer? Likewise, kind of looking down at the hyaluronidase dish, I know this is another critical step that lab directors like to look at and make sure aren't taking too long, and this is an average of about 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Sounds right along par because, you know, our egg retrievals vary greatly in egg number. But it's a good thing to just sit and say, how long should a procedure be taking versus how long is it actually taking? And here again, you can look by embryologist, break down their witnessing steps and the time it's taking to do that. So here, holding dishes, there's a great variation between the embryologists, and stripping, also a great variation. So this embryologist is taking a fairly short time for their egg retrieval, but a very long time for stripping. Vice versa, really long time for holding, or excuse me, for the egg retrieval itself, which would be holding, and a much shorter time for stripping. So, you know, here the factor would be, is the egg retrieval, like these are the egg donor cases, very large cases that this person's doing, and they're really good at stripping, and this person's doing maybe the smaller, but still the stripping here for 16 minutes, no matter how many eggs you have, I would call that a red flag. So this is where you would sit down with the embryologist B and say, you know what, let me watch you do this. Let's review our protocol, and then maybe you watch some of these other embryologists that have faster timing and make sure, one, that we're all doing it the same way, and two, that there may not be any training that's necessary here. So using the RI Witness analytics to your full potential will benefit your lab in the following ways, which we've kind of reviewed. It identifies your weak spots in the laboratory. It's going to identify the areas that need review and update. It's going to improve your workflow, and it's going to highlight your needs for training, which ultimately, if all of this happens, it's going to improve your outcomes and make your lab one of the best out there. So hopefully you'll see that RI Witness has a few more surprises than you were expecting, which it did for me. So I hope that helps, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.